Long before Manny Pacquiao became a world champion, before the arenas, the belts, and the millions of cheering fans, he was just a skinny boy in the dusty streets of General Santos City, Philippines. His family lived in deep poverty. Some days there was food on the table. Many days there wasn't. Manny remembered nights when he went to bed with an empty stomach, his only comfort being the thought that maybe tomorrow would be better. But even in the middle of that struggle, there were angels disguised as ordinary people. One of them was a kind woman named Aling Rosa. She worked as a maid for a well-off family nearby. Her job was difficult, the pay was barely enough, yet she always carried a smile. Every time Manny wandered by her employer's house, hoping for even the smallest scrap to ease his hunger, she noticed him. Instead of turning him away, Aling Rosa did something simple but life-changing. When there were leftovers from her employer's kitchen, she would quietly set some aside for Manny. A piece of bread, a bowl of rice, sometimes just a little soup. To others it might not have meant much, but to a hungry child it was everything. Manny never forgot the warmth of those meals, not just because they filled his stomach, but because they carried compassion. In a world that often ignored poor children like him, here was someone who saw him, cared for him, and treated him with dignity. As the years passed, Manny's hunger became a fuel, driving him to fight harder, train longer, and dream bigger. But deep in his heart, he carried the memory of Aling Rosa. He promised himself that if he ever made it out of poverty, he would return and thank the people who helped him survive. At that time, neither Manny nor Aling Rosa could have imagined what destiny had in store. That little boy with the hungry eyes would grow into a global icon, and one day, decades later, he would come back. Not as a boy begging for food, but as a man ready to give back more than she ever expected. Years later, when Manny finally found her, what he did left her in tears. Manny Pacquiao's rise was nothing short of a miracle. From a boy who once ran barefoot in the streets with hunger gnawing at his stomach, he became a man whose fists would shake the boxing world. But that journey was paved with struggle, sweat, and sacrifice. As a teenager, Manny left his hometown with nothing but a dream. He worked odd jobs just to survive, selling bread, shining shoes, even working in construction. At night, he trained tirelessly, fighting his way through small local boxing matches for just a few pesos. Sometimes his prize money wasn't enough to even buy proper food, yet through every hardship he remembered the taste of Aling Rosa's kindness. He remembered her giving him rice when he was too shy to ask. He remembered her smile that said, "You matter," even when the world treated him as invisible. Those moments stayed carved in his heart like an unshakable promise. Years later, the world began to recognize the name Manny Pacquiao. First, it was the Philippines, then Asia, and soon the entire globe. With each victory, his lightning speed, his iron fists, his relentless will, he climbed higher. He wasn't just fighting opponents in the ring. He was fighting poverty, injustice, and the pain of his childhood. But with fame came noise. Cameras followed him, fans screamed his name, and the world demanded his attention. Yet in the quiet moments between fights, his thoughts often returned to his roots. He remembered the days when he had nothing. And above all, he remembered the people who had shown him compassion when he was at his lowest. Among those faces, Aling Rosa's stood out like a light in the dark. Decades had passed since those hungry days, but Manny had never forgotten her. One evening, as he sat reflecting after training, he turned to his team and said, "Do you know who I want to find? The maid who used to feed me when I was a child. She gave me food when I had nothing. I want to see her again." His team was surprised. With all his achievements, most would expect him to focus on celebrities, politicians, or other powerful figures. But Manny's heart was different. He valued humility, kindness, and the people who had touched his life in simple but profound ways. The search for Aling Rosa was not easy. She had never sought attention, never boasted about helping a boy who would one day become a legend. She lived quietly, working hard and growing older with each passing year. While the world celebrated Pacquiao's victories, she remained in the background, unaware that the champion still carried her memory like a treasure. For weeks, Manny's staff reached out to old neighbors, community leaders, and anyone who might know where she was. Slowly, the pieces came together. Someone mentioned a woman, now elderly, who lived in a modest home not too far from where Manny grew up. She was still working, still humble, still carrying the quiet strength of someone who had endured a lifetime of hardship. When Manny heard the news, his heart swelled. He knew it had to be her. He made a decision he would visit her personally, not as a senator, not as the people's champ, but as the hungry boy she once fed finally coming back to say thank you. The day of the visit, Manny dressed simply. No bodyguards, no reporters, no cameras, just him and a few close companions. As they drove through the familiar streets of his childhood, memories flooded back. Dusty roads, children running barefoot, the smell of street food, the laughter of neighbors. So much had changed, yet so much remained the same. His heart pounded with anticipation. What would she say when she saw him? Would she even recognize him after all these years? Would she believe that the boy she had fed had become one of the greatest boxers in history? As the car pulled up to her neighborhood, Manny felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. For all the titles he had won, for all the arenas he had filled, this moment felt bigger than any championship fight. Because this was not about glory, this was about gratitude. He stepped out of the car, the sun casting a golden glow over the small houses lined along the street. Neighbors peeked curiously, wondering what brought the great Manny Pacquiao here. But Manny didn't stop to explain. His eyes were fixed on one door, the door of the woman who had once saved him from hunger. With each step, his childhood memories grew sharper. He could almost see his younger self again, the boy with hollow cheeks peeking shyly at the maid who always had a little extra food to share. Now, the moment had come. He was about to knock. Do you believe we should always honor the people who helped us when we were nothing? Comment yes if you agree. Manny Pacquiao stood silently in front of the small wooden house. His hands, which had once thrown punches felt around the world, now trembled slightly, not from fear of an opponent, but from the weight of this moment. For years, he had carried the memory of Aling Rosa in his heart. Now, after so much searching, he was finally here. He took a deep breath and gently knocked on the door. At first, there was no answer. The neighborhood children, recognizing Manny, began whispering excitedly. That's Pacquiao. Why is he here? Word spread quickly, and soon small groups of curious neighbors gathered, their eyes fixed on the champion standing humbly at an old maid's doorstep. Then the door creaked open. An elderly woman, frail but still carrying the dignity of years of hard work, appeared. Her hair was streaked with gray, her hands worn from decades of labor. She squinted, as though trying to recognize the unexpected visitor. Good afternoon, Po, Manny said softly, bowing his head respectfully. She looked at him carefully. For a moment she only saw a stranger, a tall man neatly dressed with the unmistakable aura of someone important. But then her eyes lingered on his face. His smile, his eyes. Something about him stirred a distant memory. Manny? She whispered, her voice shaking. Manny's throat tightened. Hearing his name spoken by the woman who once saved him from hunger broke something inside him. He nodded quickly, fighting back his own emotions. Yes, Aling Rosa. It's me, the old woman gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Tears immediately welled in her eyes. She stepped closer, trembling as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Ikaw na ba talaga? The little boy who used to come hungry? The one I gave food to? Manny's eyes glistened. He slowly knelt before her, his head bowed like a son before his mother. Yes, Po, it's me. I never forgot you. You helped me when I had nothing, and I came back to thank you. The crowd that had gathered around fell silent. No one moved. Everyone could feel the raw power of the moment, the humility of a world champion kneeling before a poor maid who had once shown him kindness. Tears streamed down Aling Rosa's cheeks as she reached out, touching Manny's face as if to confirm he was real. I only gave you a little food, Anna. Just rice, sometimes bread. I never imagined. Her voice cracked and she pulled him into her arms. I never imagined you would become this man. For a few moments, they simply embraced. Manny, who had faced the fiercest opponents in the ring, found himself overwhelmed by the soft embrace of an old woman who had once given him scraps of food, and somehow it felt more powerful than any victory he had ever won. When they finally pulled apart, Manny wiped her tears gently with his handkerchief. What you gave me was not little, Aling Rosa. To a hungry boy, it was everything. It gave me the strength to keep going. Without you, maybe I wouldn't be here today. Her lips trembled as she shook her head. You were always strong, Manny. I just did what I could. Manny smiled. And that's why I'm here. Because I will never forget the people who helped me when I was nothing. Today I came not as a senator, not as a champion, but as that same hungry boy who owes you his life. The neighbors watching were moved to tears. Many wiped their eyes, whispering to each other. Even after all his success, he still remembers. Some recorded the moment on their phones, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary, a story that would touch millions. Manny insisted on stepping inside. The home was simple, its walls lined with old photographs and faded curtains. It smelled faintly of cooking oil and laundry soap. Despite the modesty, Manny looked around with respect, not judgment. He sat humbly on a wooden chair while Aling Rosa fussed over him, offering water as if he were still the little boy she had once cared for. Inside, the two talked about old times. Manny asked if she remembered how she used to hide food for him so her employer wouldn't notice. She laughed through her tears, nodding. Yes, I remember. I thought to myself, this boy is too thin. If I don't share, he might not last. Manny chuckled softly, his voice thick with emotion. And now look at me. Because of you, I had the strength to fight, to dream, to survive. The conversation carried on, filled with laughter, tears, and memories. But underneath it all was one unshakable truth. Manny's gratitude had never faded, and Aling Rosa's kindness had come full circle. As the sun began to set, Manny finally stood. The neighbors gathered closer, eager to see what would happen next. Manny placed his hand gently over Aling Rosa's and looked into her eyes. Aling Rosa, he said, his voice steady but emotional. I came here today to thank you, but I also came here to make you a promise. You will never struggle alone again. Her tears fell harder, her frail body trembling with emotion. She didn't know what he meant yet, but she could feel the sincerity in his words. And in that moment, the anticipation grew. The crowd sensed something big was about to happen, something that would change Aling Rosa's life forever. What Manny revealed next left Aling Rosa crying uncontrollably, and the whole neighborhood cheering. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the small neighborhood. By now, nearly everyone in the area had gathered outside Aling Rosa's house. Word had spread quickly. Manny Pacquiao, the people's champ, was here. But what moved them most was not just his presence. It was the sight of him sitting humbly in the modest home of an elderly maid who had once shown him kindness. Inside, Manny held Aling Rosa's hands gently, his eyes glistening. He cleared his throat, then stood up, turning slightly so the neighbors could hear. What came out of his mouth was not a rehearsed speech or a politician's promise. It was the raw truth of a man remembering where he came from. Everyone knows me today as a boxer. A senator, a man with fame and success, Manny began, his voice calm but steady. But before all that, I was just a hungry boy. I was just another child who had nothing. No money, no food, no future. I came from the very streets many of you walk every day. The crowd nodded, murmuring in agreement. They knew his story, but hearing it in this setting with Aling Rosa by his side made it hit differently. Manny paused, glancing at her with deep respect. There were many days when I went to bed with an empty stomach. But God sent angels into my life, people who gave me strength when I had none. And one of those angels, he said, squeezing her hand, was Aling Rosa. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some clapped their hands to their mouths. Others looked at Aling Rosa with newfound reverence. She worked hard as a maid, earning so little. Yet, she found the heart to share food with me when she didn't have to. To some, it may have seemed small. Just rice, just bread, just leftovers. But to me, it was life itself. At this point, Aling Rosa was already crying, shaking her head as if to say she had done nothing special. But Manny continued, his voice growing stronger, resonating like it did in the ring when he gave his victory speeches. I never forgot her kindness. Through all my fights, through every battle I faced, I carried her memory in my heart. She reminded me that no matter how poor we are, we can still choose to be kind. We can still choose to give. The neighbors began to clap softly, moved by his words. Some wiped their eyes. Even the toughest-looking men in the crowd nodded with tears in their eyes. And so today, Manny said, turning back fully to Aling Rosa, I came here not as the champion people see on TV, but as that same hungry boy you once fed. And I came to say two words I've wanted to tell you for so long. Salamat po. Thank you. He bowed deeply right there in front of her. The crowd erupted, cheers, applause, shouts of admiration. The sound was not like a stadium roar, but something purer, something rooted in love and respect. Ailing Rosa sobbed openly now, covering her face with her trembling hands. "Anak," she said through her tears. "I never thought you would remember. I only gave you what I could." Manny gently lifted her chin so she could look at him. "I remembered, Ailing Rosa. I remembered every single time, and I will never forget. Because what you gave me was not just food. It was dignity, hope, and love." Neighbors pressed closer, their phones recording, their hearts touched. A woman in the crowd whispered, "This is what true greatness looks like, not in the ring, but here." The air was thick with emotion. Every word Manny spoke cut deep, reminding everyone of the power of gratitude, of never forgetting one's roots. And then, just as the emotions reached their peak, Manny's tone shifted. He straightened his shoulders, his voice calm but firm. "But I cannot let this story end here," he declared. "I cannot allow the woman who once saved me from hunger to continue living in hardship. It is my turn now to give back." The crowd collectively held its breath. What did he mean? What was he about to do? Manny turned back to Ailing Rosa, holding her hands tightly. His eyes shone with both love and determination. "You spent your life serving others, feeding others, caring for others. From this day forward, you will not have to worry again. You will not be alone. You will not be hungry." Gasps rose from the crowd. Some people began crying even before they knew the full details, because they could feel the sincerity in Manny's promise. Ailing Rosa shook her head, overwhelmed. "No, Anak, I didn't do it for anything in return. I just wanted to help a hungry boy." Manny smiled through his tears. "And now let that same boy return as a man to help you. This is not charity, it is gratitude. You gave me when I had nothing. Now I will give you everything I can." The suspense was unbearable. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. Manny was about to reveal what he had planned for Ailing Rosa, and what he was about to say would leave her crying uncontrollably and the whole neighborhood cheering. What Manny revealed as his gift changed her life forever. The air outside Ailing Rosa's humble home was thick with anticipation. The neighbors leaned in, eyes wide, phones raised, trying to capture every second of this extraordinary moment. Manny Pacquiao, their hero, stood in front of the frail woman who once fed him as a child, about to reveal something that would change her life forever. He squeezed her hands and looked her in the eye. "Ailing Rosa," he said softly, "you once gave me food when I had nothing. Today I want to give you something in return, not just for that moment, but for the love and kindness you showed a hungry boy." The old woman shook her head quickly, tears still streaming down her cheeks. "Anak, no. I don't need anything. I was happy just to see you again. That is already more than I could ever dream of." But Manny's voice grew firmer, steady like the champion he was. "Please don't refuse. This is not charity. This is my way of saying thank you." He paused, taking a deep breath before turning to the crowd so they could all hear. "From this day forward, Ailing Rosa will never have to struggle again. I am giving her a new home, safe, comfortable, and hers forever." The crowd gasped. Some people clapped instantly. Others covered their mouths in shock. Children shouted, "Wow!" while neighbors began to cheer louder and louder. The energy was electric, almost like a championship fight night. But this time the battle was for love and gratitude. Ailing Rosa's knees buckled slightly. She clutched her chest, unable to believe what she had just heard. "A home for me?" she whispered, almost too faintly to hear. Manny nodded, smiling through his own tears. "Yes, Po. A home where you can rest, where you don't have to work anymore, where you will be comfortable and cared for. You gave me bread when I was a boy. Now I give you a house because you gave me hope when I had none." Her sobs grew stronger. She covered her face with her trembling hands, shaking her head in disbelief. "Lord, I never expected this. I only gave him scraps of food. I never imagined he would remember." The neighbors began chanting, "Manny!
Manny, Manny!"
The sound grew louder, echoing down the street. Some cried openly, touched not just by the gift but by the humility of a man who never forgot where he came from. But Manny wasn't finished. He lifted his hand to quiet the crowd and continued, his voice still full of emotion. "And more than the house, I want to make sure you are cared for the rest of your life. From today, I will provide for your needs, your food, your medicine, everything. You will not have to worry again." The reaction was explosive. Cheers erupted. Women wiped tears from their eyes and men clapped Manny on the back, shouting praises. The atmosphere felt like a festival, but at its core, it was a sacred moment of gratitude made public. Ailing Rosa reached out for Manny's hand. gripping it tightly with all the strength she had left. "Anak," she sobbed, "I never asked for anything. I only wanted to help a hungry child, but you are giving me the world." Manny knelt down before her again, his voice thick with emotion. "Because you gave me life. Without you, I might not be standing here today. This is not just for me. This is for every hungry child you ever showed kindness to. You are part of my story and the world needs to know it." The neighbors erupted in applause once more, some chanting, "Salamat, Manny," while others embraced each other, unable to hold back their emotions. Phones flashed, recording the tears, the cheers, and the embrace between the people's champ and the woman who had once saved him. For a long while, Manny and Aling Rosa simply held each other, surrounded by the love of the community. It was not just a reunion, it was a redemption of years of struggle, a living proof that kindness never goes unnoticed, and that gratitude can echo across decades. Finally, Manny stood and addressed the crowd once more. "I want everyone here to remember this. Never forget the people who helped you when you were nothing. Success means nothing if you forget your roots, if you forget the hands that lifted you up when you were down. Aling Rosa is my reminder of that truth, and I hope she can be yours too." The crowd roared in agreement, chanting her name now as well. "Rosa. Rosa, Rosa!" The elderly woman, overwhelmed but smiling through her tears, waved weakly at the neighbors who now looked at her not as just a maid, but as a hero in her own right. It was a moment that transcended wealth, fame, or status. Here stood a world champion kneeling before a simple maid, proving that true greatness is not measured by titles or riches but by humility and gratitude. As the cheers rang out, Manny leaned close to Aling Rosa and whispered, "This is only the beginning. Tomorrow will take you to see your new home." She wept again, this time with tears of joy that seemed endless, and in that moment the crowd understood. This was more than a gift. It was justice. It was love. It was Manny Pacquiao showing the world that the greatest champions are those who never forget where they came from. The very next day, Manny revealed the house he had prepared for her, and the reaction was unforgettable. The very next morning, Manny Pacquiao returned for Aling Rosa. A small convoy of cars waited outside her neighborhood, attracting curious onlookers. But this was not about spectacle or publicity. Manny had made it clear there would be no press release, no official announcement. This was a private gift from one heart to another. Still, the neighbors gathered to witness the continuation of a story that had already touched them deeply. They cheered as Manny helped Aling Rosa into a car himself, treating her not as a figure of charity, but as someone he loved and respected. "Are you ready?" Manny asked gently as she settled into the seat. Her hands trembled, her eyes already moist. "Anak, I still can't believe this is real. Yesterday felt like a dream." Manny smiled warmly. "Today we make that dream real." The drive took less than half an hour, but to Aling Rosa it felt like a lifetime. She stared quietly out the window, clasping her hands together as if praying. Beside her, Manny occasionally reassured her with a smile or a light pat on the hand. Finally, the convoy slowed and stopped in front of a freshly painted house with a small garden in front. It was modest compared to mansions, but for someone who had lived her whole life in cramped rooms and borrowed spaces, it looked like a palace. Neighbors from the area had already gathered, waving banners that read, "Welcome home, Aling Rosa." Someone had even prepared flowers. The atmosphere was festive, almost like a fiesta, but everyone knew this was more than a celebration. It was history. Manny stepped out first, then extended his hand to help her down. As her feet touched the ground, her eyes locked onto the house. She froze, her lips trembled. "Anak, is this mine?" Manny nodded firmly, smiling through tears of his own. "Yes, Po. This is your home. From today, it belongs to you. No more rent, no more worries. This is where you can rest, where you can live with peace and dignity." At that moment, Aling Rosa broke down. She sobbed uncontrollably, covering her face with both hands. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, their voices rising in unison. Some cried with her, others clapped and shouted Manny's name. But everyone felt the weight of the moment. Manny guided her gently toward the gate. "Come," he said softly. "Let's go inside." As she stepped through the doorway, her knees almost buckled. The house smelled of fresh paint, the floor gleamed with new tiles, and the walls were adorned with simple but beautiful curtains. There was a kitchen fully stocked with food, a living room with a comfortable sofa, and a bedroom prepared just for her, with clean sheets, a soft bed, and even framed photos of her younger self that Manny's team had found and restored. Her tears flowed endlessly. "Lord, is this really for me?" she whispered. Manny placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Yes, Po. You gave me food when I had nothing. Now I give you a home, because you deserve to live with comfort, respect, and love." Neighbors who had followed inside gasped at the beauty of the home. Some women embraced Aling Rosa, crying with her, while the men patted Manny on the back, praising his humility. Children ran around excitedly, marveling at the new house as though it was magic. But Manny wasn't done yet. He turned once more to Aling Rosa and said, "This is not just about a house. From today, all your needs will be taken care of: food, medicine, and support. You will never be hungry again." Her cries grew louder. She fell to her knees, clasping her hands together in prayer. "Salamat, anak, salamat. I never imagined this day would come. I only gave you scraps, and you returned with a life I never dreamed of." Manny quickly knelt with her, lifting her up. "No, Aling Rosa, you gave me more than scraps. You gave me hope. You gave me strength when I was weakest, and that is worth more than gold." The crowd outside had now grown larger, chanting Manny's name, but also chanting Rosa. "Rosa! Rosa!" For the first time in her life, the maid who had lived in the shadows of others' homes was celebrated like a hero. Manny smiled at the neighbors. This is what greatness means: not fame, not riches, not titles. True greatness is remembering your roots and honoring those who helped you when you had nothing. The words rang out like a sermon, sinking deep into everyone's hearts. People nodded, many crying, some clapping passionately. It was a message of humility, of gratitude, and of justice for the often forgotten working poor. Inside her new home, Aling Rosa sat on her bed, still unable to stop crying. But this time her tears were not of struggle. They were of relief, joy, and dignity. For the first time in decades, she felt truly seen, truly honored, and finally at peace. And Manny, watching her smile through the tears, knew that this was one of the greatest victories of his life, greater than any championship belt he had ever won. The story of Manny's gift didn't stay in that neighborhood. It spread across the world, inspiring millions. What happened next made headlines everywhere. By the evening of that unforgettable day, word had already spread beyond the neighborhood. What started as a private reunion quickly became the talk of the town. Neighbors who had witnessed the moment posted videos online, clips of Manny kneeling before Aling Rosa, her cries of disbelief as she stepped into her new home, and the roar of the crowd chanting both their names. Within hours, the videos exploded across social media. Millions of people in the Philippines shared them, praising Manny for his humility and gratitude. Soon, international news outlets picked up the story. Boxing legend Manny Pacquiao surprises maid who fed him as a child with a new home. Across the world, people watched the clips and felt their hearts stirred. Comments flooded in. "This is what true greatness looks like. Respect to Manny for never forgetting his roots." I cried watching this. We need more heroes like him. Even those who weren't boxing fans were moved. For them, it wasn't about sports, it was about humanity. It was about a boy who never forgot the hand that fed him when he was hungry, and a man who proved that kindness never fades with time. In the Philippines, the story struck a deeper chord. For many working-class families, Aling Rosa symbolized their mothers, grandmothers, aunts, and neighbors, ordinary people who lived quietly, sacrificing daily, rarely recognized for their efforts. Seeing Manny honor her was like seeing every forgotten worker finally given the respect they deserved. For Aling Rosa, the days that followed were overwhelming. Reporters showed up at her doorstep, eager to interview the woman who had unknowingly helped shape a legend. But through it all, she remained humble. "I only did what I could," she repeated. "I never expected anything. Manny was just a hungry boy. I only gave him food." Her humility made the story even more powerful. People saw not just a hero in Manny, but also in her. She became a symbol of how even the simplest acts of kindness can ripple across generations. Manny, on the other hand, avoided making it about himself. When asked by reporters why he did it, his answer was simple: "I will never forget the people who helped me when I was nothing." This is not about me, it's about gratitude and it's about respect. No one should ever be judged by how poor they are, because the poorest hearts often carry the greatest kindness. Those words were quoted everywhere. Teachers shared them in classrooms. Preachers repeated them in sermons. Motivational speakers used them as reminders of humility. The story wasn't just about Manny and Eileen Rosa anymore. It became a lesson for the world. In boxing circles, fellow fighters praised Manny not for his punches, but for his character. Commentators said, Pacquiao may be the only fighter whose biggest victory happened outside the ring. And perhaps they were right. Because while championship belts eventually fade, this story was immortalized in the hearts of millions. For Eileen Rosa, life changed forever. No longer did she worry about where her next meal would come from. No longer did she feel invisible, like just another maid serving quietly in the background. Now she lived in dignity, surrounded by love, celebrated as part of history. But more than the house, more than the financial support, what moved her most was the feeling that she mattered, that the small kindness she once gave had blossomed into something beautiful decades later. Every time she looked at her new home, she didn't just see walls and a roof. She saw Manny's gratitude. She saw proof that kindness is never wasted. As for Manny, he returned to his duties as a senator and his training as a fighter, but he carried a renewed fire in his heart. "This is why I fight," he told a friend quietly. "Not for money, not for fame, but so I can give back. Because everything I have now came from people like her, ordinary people who never gave up on me." The story lived on long after the cameras left. Weeks later, children in schools were asked to write essays about it. Many wrote that they wanted to be like Manny, grateful, humble, and generous. Others said they wanted to be like Eileen Rosa, kind, compassionate, and willing to help even when they had little themselves. And perhaps that was the greatest legacy of all, not just a house for one woman, but inspiration for an entire generation. The final clip that went most viral was simple: Manny and Eileen Rosa, hand in hand, standing outside her new home, smiling through tears. Underneath, someone had written the caption, "Never forget the people who helped you when you had nothing." That single sentence captured the essence of the story. And millions around the world typed one word in the comments: respect. If you believe gratitude and kindness can change the world, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one.